The divorce papers hit the table with a soft thud that somehow echoed louder than any scream I'd ever heard. Jonas stood there in his pressed khakis and navy button-down, looking more composed than he had in months, while every eye in the restaurant turned toward our table. My company's annual celebration dinner had just become my public execution. "Lorraine Orsay," he said quietly, his voice carrying that teacher's authority I'd forgotten he possessed. "You've been served." Before we dive deeper into this story, I have one small request. Please subscribe, drop a like, comment, and hit that hype button to boost this channel so more people can discover these incredible stories. 3 weeks earlier, I was spooning lukewarm chicken soup into a bowl, trying not to let my irritation show as Jonas shifted uncomfortably on our living room couch. The gallbladder surgery had been minor, laparoscopic, same-day procedure, but he was milking it like he'd had his entire torso reconstructed. "Could you fluff my pillow again?" he asked, wincing dramatically as he tried to sit up straighter. I forced a smile and walked over, punching the pillow harder than necessary. "Better?" "Thanks, babe. I don't know what I'd do without you." The gratitude in his voice made my skin crawl. This was exactly the problem with our marriage. Jonas was content with mediocrity, satisfied with his high school teaching job and our cramped 2-bedroom apartment, while I was drowning in the mundane routine of it all. At 32, I deserved more than playing nursemaid to a man who couldn't even be bothered to advance his career. "Ava, dinner," I called to our 7-year-old daughter, who was sprawled on her bedroom floor with her coloring books. She bounded into the kitchen, her dark curls bouncing. She looked so much like Jonas, it sometimes made me ache with an emotion I couldn't quite name. Love or resentment, I was never sure which. "Is Daddy feeling better?" Eva asked, climbing into her chair. "Daddy's fine," I said, perhaps too sharply. "He just needs to rest." My phone buzzed on the counter. A text from my mother, Jocelyn. "How's Jonas? Still being dramatic about a tiny procedure?" I smiled despite myself. At least someone understood. My mother had never been impressed with Jonas's lack of ambition, his contentment with a teacher's salary, when he could have gone into administration or even left education entirely for something more lucrative. Another buzz. This time, the name on the screen made my pulse quicken. Elliot Rayner. "Hey, stranger. Heard through the grapevine that Jonas had surgery. Hope you're holding up okay. Coffee sometime." I glanced toward the living room where Jonas was dozing, mouth slightly open, looking older than his 34 years. When had he become this person? When had we become this couple? "Lorraine?" Eva was looking at me expectantly. "Can I have dessert?" "What? Oh, sure, honey. There's ice cream in the freezer." As Eva rummaged through the freezer, I typed back to Elliot. "It's been a long few days. Coffee sounds perfect." The front door opened, and Marina, Jonas's younger sister, walked in without knocking, a habit that had always annoyed me. "How's the patient?" she asked, but her eyes were on me, sharp and assessing. "Recovering," I said, slipping my phone into my back pocket. "You know how men are with pain." Marina's expression tightened. "Actually, I think Jonas handles pain pretty well. Always has." There was something pointed in her tone that made me defensive. "Well, he's certainly making sure everyone knows about this particular pain." "Aunt Marina," Eva launched herself at her aunt, who caught her in a fierce hug. "Hey, little bug, how are you taking care of everyone?" "Mummy's been making soup, but she sighs a lot," Eva said, with the brutal honesty of childhood. Marina's eyes found mine again. "Sighing, huh?" "It's been stressful," I said. "I'm trying to keep up with work and take care of Jonas and manage everything else. It's a lot." "I could help more," Marina offered. "I could come by after work, bring dinner, help with Eva." "That's not necessary. We're managing fine." But Marina was already walking into the living room, where Jonas was stirring awake. "Hey, big brother, how are you feeling?" "Like I got hit by a truck," Jonas said, but he was smiling at his sister in a way that made something twist in my chest. The doctor said it was a very routine procedure, I called from the kitchen. Thousands of people have it done every day. Marina shot me a look. That doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. I busied myself loading the dishwasher, listening to their quiet conversation. Marina had always been protective of Jonas, even though she was 3 years younger. She'd never quite approved of me, though she'd never said so directly. It was more in the way she watched me, like she was waiting for me to prove her suspicions right. My phone buzzed again. Elliot. Tomorrow. That little cafe on Elm Street around 10. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. It was just coffee. Just a conversation with an old friend. Jonas would be fine for an hour or two. Marina was here and he was mostly sleeping anyway. Sounds perfect, I typed back. Lorraine, Jonas called. Could you bring me some water? I grabbed a glass and filled it, walking back to the living room where Marina was perched on the edge of the coffee table, talking quietly to her brother. Here, I said, handing Jonas the water. Thanks, Marina was just saying she could take some time off work to help out this week. That's really not necessary, I said quickly. I have everything under control. Marina stood up, smoothing her jeans. Well, I'm here if you need anything. Both of you. She kissed Jonas's forehead and hugged Eva goodbye, then paused at the door. Lorraine, can I talk to you for a second? We stepped into the hallway outside our apartment. Marina closed the door behind us and turned to face me, her expression serious. Jonas is really hurting, she said quietly. I know it seems like a minor surgery, but he's not one to complain usually. Maybe just be kind to him. He adores you, you know. The words hit me like a slap. I am being kind. I'm doing everything. Cooking, cleaning, taking care of Eva, managing the house. What more do you want from me? I want you to act like you care about him, Marina said, her voice steady but firm. Because right now you're acting like he's an inconvenience. Heat flooded my face. You have no idea what you're talking about. You don't live here. You don't see what I deal with every day. Marina studied my face for a long moment. You're right, I don't live here. But I know my brother, and I know when he's hurting in more ways than one. She left without another word, and I stood in the empty hallway, my heart pounding with indignation. How dare she lecture me about my own marriage? How dare she imply that I wasn't doing enough? Back inside, Jonas was asleep again, and Eva was watching cartoons. I sat at the kitchen table and pulled out my phone, scrolling through Elliot's social media. He looked good. Better than good. Success suited him. His marketing firm was thriving, and his Instagram was full of photos from business trips and social events. He looked like someone who was living the life I should be living. At 33, Elliot had everything Jonas lacked: ambition, financial success, and that easy confidence that came with knowing you were winning at life. We'd dated for 2 years in our mid-20s, and I'd been the one to end it, choosing stability with Jonas over the uncertainty of Elliot's big dreams. Now, looking at where we'd both ended up, I wondered if I'd made the wrong choice. My phone lit up with another message from Elliot. Looking forward to catching up tomorrow. It's been too long. I smiled, feeling something I hadn't felt in months: anticipation. The cafe on Elm Street was exactly the kind of place Elliot would choose. Exposed brick walls, artisanal coffee, and a clientele of young professionals tapping away on MacBooks. I'd spent an extra 20 minutes getting ready that morning, choosing a blue dress that Jonas had always said brought out my eyes, then changing into jeans and a fitted sweater that looked more casual but somehow felt more intentional. Elliot was already there when I arrived, sitting at a corner table with 2 cups in front of him. He stood when he saw me, and I was struck by how good he looked, tall and lean in an expensive-looking charcoal sweater, his dark hair styled in a way that probably cost more than Jonas spent on clothes in a month. Lorraine. He hugged me, and I caught a whiff of his cologne, something sophisticated and unfamiliar. You look amazing. Thanks. You look pretty good yourself. I slid into the seat across from him, accepting the latte he pushed toward me. Oat milk? I remembered. His smile was warm, intimate. Some things don't change. We fell into conversation easily, the way we always had. Elliot told me about his business, the clients he was landing, the condo he'd just bought in the trendy part of downtown. I found myself talking about work, about the challenges of managing HR for a mid-sized company, about the politics and personalities that made each day interesting. "You always were good with people," Elliot said. "I'm not surprised you ended up in HR, though I always thought you'd be running your own company by now." The comment stung because it echoed thoughts I'd been having more and more lately. "Life gets complicated," I said. "Marriage, kids, responsibilities." "How is Jonas?" Elliot asked, and something in his tone made me look up sharply. "He's fine. Recovering from surgery." "Right, you mentioned that. Nothing serious, I hope." "Gallbladder, routine procedure, but you'd think he'd had open-heart surgery the way he's acting." Elliot raised an eyebrow. "That doesn't sound like you being unsympathetic." "I'm not unsympathetic. I'm just realistic. He's been off work for a week, and he could probably go back tomorrow if he wanted to, but he's comfortable being taken care of." "And you're comfortable taking care of him?" The question hung in the air between us. I took a sip of my latte, buying time. "It's what you do when you're married." "Is it what you want to do?" I looked at Elliot, really looked at him. His eyes were the same warm brown I remembered, but there was something new there, a confidence that hadn't been there when we were younger. He was successful now, established, the kind of man who could offer a woman a different kind of life. "I want a lot of things," I said quietly. "Such as?" "I want to feel like I'm living, not just existing. I want to wake up excited about the day instead of dreading it. I want to feel like the person I'm with sees me as more than just a wife and mother." Elliot leaned forward. "Jonas doesn't see you that way." I thought about Jonas on the couch, asking for water, for soup, for his pillow to be fluffed. I thought about our conversations, which revolved around Eva's school schedule and household maintenance and his students' latest antics. When was the last time he'd asked me about my dreams, my goals, what I wanted from life? "Jonas sees me as comfortable," I said, "safe, reliable. And that's not enough? Would it be enough for you?" Elliot smiled, and I felt something flutter in my chest that I hadn't felt in years. "No," he said, "it wouldn't be." We talked for 2 hours, about books we'd read, places we wanted to travel, dreams we'd put on hold. Elliot told me about his recent trip to Barcelona, about the art and architecture, and late-night dinners that stretched until dawn. I told him about the novel I'd started writing but never finished, about the photography class I'd wanted to take but couldn't fit into my schedule of work and family obligations. "You should finish the novel," he said as we prepared to leave. "I should do a lot of things." "What's stopping you?" I thought about Jonas, about Eva, about the endless cycle of responsibilities that filled my days. Time, energy, life. Or maybe you've just convinced yourself you don't deserve to be happy. The words hit me like a physical blow. That's not true. Isn't it? You're 32, Lorraine. You're beautiful, intelligent, talented. You could have any life you wanted. The question is, what do you want? I wanted to feel the way I felt right now, sitting across from someone who saw me as more than a caregiver. I wanted conversations that challenged me, experiences that excited me, a partner who made me feel alive instead of settled. "I should go," I said, but I didn't move. "Should," Elliot repeated. "There's that word again." My phone buzzed. A text from Jonas. "Feeling a bit better today. Thanks for taking such good care of me. Love you." The guilt hit immediately, sharp and uncomfortable. Here I was, having coffee with my ex-boyfriend, complaining about my husband while he recovered from surgery. What kind of person did that make me? But then I looked at Elliot, at his easy smile and confident posture, and the guilt faded. I deserved this. I deserved to feel appreciated, to have stimulating conversation, to be seen as more than just a domestic support system. Same time next week? Elliot asked as we stood to leave. I hesitated for just a moment. Yes. He kissed my cheek goodbye, his lips lingering just a second longer than they should have. I'm glad we reconnected, Lorraine. I've missed this. I've missed you. The drive home felt surreal, like I was floating between two different versions of my life. In one, I was Lorraine, the wife and mother, rushing home to check on my recovering husband and help my daughter with her homework. In the other, I was Lorraine the woman, interesting and desirable and full of untapped potential. Jonas was awake when I got home, sitting up on the couch with his laptop open. Hey, he said, looking up with a smile. How was coffee with Sarah? I told him I was meeting Sarah from work, a small lie that had slipped out so easily it scared me. Good, she's having drama with her boyfriend. Aren't you glad we're past all that? Jonas said, reaching for my hand as I sat beside him. His hand was warm and familiar, calloused from his weekend woodworking projects. It was a good hand, a kind hand, attached to a good, kind man who loved me and trusted me completely. So why did it feel like a shackle? How are you feeling? I asked, deflecting. Much better. I think I could probably go back to work Monday. That's great. I was thinking, when I'm fully recovered, maybe we could plan a weekend getaway. Just the two of us. Marina could watch Eva. A weekend away with Jonas meant modest accommodations, chain restaurants, and early bedtimes. It meant being grateful for small pleasures and pretending that was enough. That sounds nice, I lied. That night, as Jonas slept beside me, I stared at the ceiling and thought about Elliot's question. What do you want? I wanted more than nice. I wanted extraordinary. My phone, charging on the nightstand, lit up with a text from Elliot. Thank you for today. You reminded me why I fell for you in the first place. I should have deleted it, should have blocked his number, should have focused on my marriage and my family and the life I'd chosen. Instead, I typed back, thank you for reminding me who I used to be. The response came immediately. You're still that person, Lorraine. You just need someone who sees it. I deleted the conversation and put my phone face down, but I couldn't delete the way his words made me feel. For the first time in years, someone saw me as more than just a role I played. The question was, what was I willing to do about it? 2 weeks later, I was standing in Elliot's apartment at 11 o'clock at night, my heart hammering against my ribs as he poured wine into 2 glasses. I can't stay long, I said, though I made no move toward the door. Relax, Elliot said, handing me the wine. Jonas thinks you're at book club, right? I nodded, taking a sip of the wine, something expensive and complex that Jonas would never think to buy. It usually runs late. Perfect cover. The word cover made something twist in my stomach, but I pushed the feeling away. This wasn't about deception. This was about reclaiming myself, about remembering who I was before I became someone's wife and someone's mother. Elliot's apartment was everything ours wasn't. Spacious, modern, decorated with actual art instead of Eva's crayon masterpieces and Jonas's amateur photography. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a view of the city lights, and everything felt intentional, curated, adult. This place is incredible, I said, walking to the windows. Thanks. I finally feel like I'm living the life I always imagined. He came up behind me, close enough that I could feel the warmth of his body. What about you? Is this the life you imagined? The question was loaded, dangerous. I turned to face him, and suddenly we were inches apart, his eyes dark and intense. No, I whispered. It's not. What would your imagined life look like? I thought about Jonas at home, probably asleep on the couch with the TV still on, Eva tucked safely in her bed, both of them trusting me completely. I thought about my marriage, comfortable and predictable, and slowly suffocating me with its smallness. It would look like possibility, I said, like adventure, like being with someone who challenges me instead of just accepting me. Jonas accepts you. Jonas loves the version of me that makes his life easier. He loves the wife and mother, not the woman. Elliot reached up and tucked a strand of hair behind my ear, his fingers lingering against my cheek. I see the woman. When he kissed me, it felt like waking up after a long, dreamless sleep. It felt like coming alive again, like remembering what it was to be desired rather than just needed. We talked until almost 1 a.m, curled together on his expensive couch, my head on his shoulder. He told me about the life we could have had together, the places we could go, the things we could do. He made me laugh in a way I hadn't laughed in years, and when he looked at me, I felt beautiful and interesting and worthy of something more than mundane contentment. I should go, I said finally, though every cell in my body wanted to stay. I know. He kissed the top of my head. But you'll come back? Yes. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and guilt and exhilaration. I felt like I was living in 2 different worlds, the grey, responsible world of my marriage, and this bright, intoxicating world where I was still the person I'd been before I settled. Jonas was asleep when I got home, just as I'd predicted. I slipped into bed beside him, and he stirred, reaching for me in his sleep. "How was book club?" he mumbled. "Good," I whispered. "Go back to sleep." He pulled me closer, and I lay there in the dark, staring at the ceiling, feeling like the worst person in the world and the most alive I'd felt in years. The next morning, Jonas seemed better, more like his old self. He made breakfast for Eva and me, moving carefully but without the dramatic wincing of the past few weeks. "I think I'm ready to go back to work tomorrow," he announced over coffee. "That's great," I said, and meant it. His recovery meant less guilt about my absences, fewer questions about where I was going and when I'd be back. "Maybe we could celebrate tonight, dinner out, just the 3 of us." Eva clapped her hands. "Can we go to Giuseppe's?" Giuseppe's was a family restaurant we'd been going to since Eva was a baby, the kind of place where the waiters knew our names and our usual orders, where the food was good but not exciting, where we fit perfectly into the category of regular family. "Sure," I said, forcing enthusiasm into my voice. But as we sat in our usual booth that night, Eva chattering about school while Jonas smiled indulgently, I felt like I was watching my life from outside my body. This was my family, my life, and it should have been enough. Jonas was a good man, a good father, a good husband by any reasonable standard. So why did I feel like I was disappearing? My phone buzzed. A text from Elliot. "Thinking about you." I glanced up to find Jonas watching me. "Everything okay?" "Just work stuff," I said, putting my phone away. But Jonas's expression had changed, become more alert, more focused. "You've been getting a lot of work texts lately." "New project," I said. "Lots of moving pieces." Eva was coloring on her kids' menu, oblivious to the tension that had suddenly appeared at our table. Jonas nodded, but his eyes stayed on my face, searching. "What kind of project?" The question felt like a trap, though I couldn't say why. "Employee engagement initiative. Very boring stuff." "Right." Jonas turned his attention back to his pasta, but I could feel him watching me from the corner of his eye. That night, after Eva was in bed, Jonas sat beside me on the couch and took my hand. "Lorraine, is everything okay between us?" The question I'd been dreading. "Of course. Why would you ask that?" "You seem distant lately. Distracted. I know my surgery was stressful, and I appreciate everything you did to take care of me. But now that I'm better, I thought we'd reconnect, and instead you seem further away than ever." His voice was gentle, concerned, loving. He was trying to fix something he didn't even understand was broken, and the kindness of it made my chest ache. "I'm fine," I said. "Just tired. Work has been intense. Maybe you should take some time off. We could plan that weekend getaway I mentioned." A weekend away with Jonas felt impossible now, like trying to fit back into clothes I'd outgrown. "Maybe after this project wraps up." He studied my face in the lamplight. "I love you, you know. Whatever's going on, we can work through it together." The words should have been comforting. Instead, they felt like a weight settling on my chest, pressing down until I could barely breathe. "I love you too," I said, because it was true, even if it wasn't enough anymore. But as Jonas kissed me goodnight and settled into sleep beside me, I lay awake thinking about Elliot's apartment, about the woman I became when I was with him, about the life that was waiting for me if I was brave enough to reach for it. My phone lit up with another message. "Sweet dreams, beautiful." I should have felt guilty. Instead, I felt grateful that someone, somewhere, was thinking about me, not as a wife or mother or caregiver, but simply as a woman worth dreaming about. The next morning, Jonas went back to work, and I went back to pretending everything was normal. But something had shifted between us, a crack so small it was barely visible but deep enough that I could feel everything we'd built together starting to come apart. The family dinner at my parents' house was supposed to be a celebration of Jonas's recovery and return to work. Instead, it became the night everything started to unravel. "You look wonderful, darling," my mother said, kissing my cheek as we arrived. "Doesn't she look wonderful, Paul?" My father nodded absently, already reaching for Eva, who launched herself into his arms with a delighted squeal. "How are you feeling, Jonas?" Mum asked, her tone polite but cool. She'd never quite forgiven him for not being more ambitious, for being content with a teacher's salary when he could have done so much more. "Much better, thank you. Ready to get back to my students." "That's nice," Mum said in a tone that suggested it wasn't particularly nice at all. We were settling into the living room when Marina arrived, looking harried and slightly out of breath. "Sorry I'm late," she said, hugging Jonas. "Traffic was insane." "No problem," Dad said. "We were just catching up." Marina's eyes found mine across the room, and I felt that familiar prickle of unease. She'd been watching me more carefully lately, asking pointed questions about my schedule, my mood, my sudden interest in working late. "Eva, why don't you show everyone your drawing from art class?" I suggested, hoping to redirect attention. Eva bounded over to her backpack and pulled out a folded piece of construction paper. We had to draw our families doing something fun. She unfolded the paper with a flourish, and my blood turned to ice. The drawing showed stick figures labeled Mommy, Eva, and Elliot, standing in front of a building with Elliot's house, written in Eva's careful 7-year-old handwriting. In the corner, a smaller figure labeled Daddy sat alone on what was clearly meant to be our couch. The room went dead silent. "That's interesting, sweetie," Dad said carefully. "Who's Elliot?" "Mummy's friend," Eva said brightly. "We went to his house for dinner last week when Daddy was sleeping." I felt like I was falling through the floor. "Eva, honey, that's not—" "Yes, it is," Eva protested. "You said we were going to visit your friend Elliot, and he had the big TV, and he made us grilled cheese." Marina's eyes were locked on mine, her expression unreadable. Jonas was staring at the drawing like it might explode. "Lorraine," Mum said slowly, "who is Elliot?" "He's an old friend," I said, my voice sounding strange and high. "Eva's confused about—" "I'm not confused." Eva stamped her foot. "We went to Elliot's house, and you said it was our secret, and—" "Eva, that's enough," I snapped, more harshly than I'd intended. Eva's face crumpled, and she ran to Jonas, who gathered her into his arms automatically, his movements mechanical. "It's okay, baby," he said softly, but his eyes never left my face. Sometimes grown-ups have friends that other grown-ups don't know about. The words were carefully neutral, but I could hear the question underneath them, the hurt, the dawning understanding. "Jonas," I started, but Marina cut me off. "Elliot Rayner?" she asked, her voice sharp. "Your ex-boyfriend, Elliot?" The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. Mum's eyes widened, and Dad shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "It's not what you're thinking," I said desperately. "He's just a friend. We had coffee a few times, and once Eva came with me when I couldn't find a sitter." "You took our daughter to your ex-boyfriend's apartment." Jonas's voice was very quiet, very controlled. which somehow made it more terrifying than if he'd shouted. It wasn't like that, we just… When? The single word cut through my explanation like a blade. When what? When did you take Eva to Elliot's apartment? I felt trapped, caught between the truth and a lie that was already falling apart. Last Tuesday. You were asleep and I needed to drop something off. What did you need to drop off? The questions were coming too fast, too precise. Jonas might be a high school teacher, but he wasn't stupid, and I could see him putting the pieces together in real time. Some work documents, I said weakly. Work documents, Jonas repeated. For Elliot Rayner, who works in marketing. Marina was watching this exchange like a tennis match, her expression growing darker by the second. Mom looked confused and uncomfortable, while Dad was trying to distract Eva with his phone. Maybe we should discuss this at home, I said. No, Jonas said, still in that terrifyingly calm voice. I think we should discuss it now, in front of everyone. Since apparently everyone knows about your friendship with Elliot except your husband. That's not fair. What's not fair is finding out from a 7-year-old's drawing that my wife has been taking my daughter to her ex-boyfriend's apartment while I was recovering from surgery. The words hung in the air like a slap. Mom gasped, and Marina's hands clenched into fists. Jonas, you're overreacting, I said, but even I could hear how hollow it sounded. Am I? Let me ask you something, Lorraine. How many times have you seen Elliot since I had surgery? The question was a trap, and we both knew it. If I lied, Eva might contradict me. If I told the truth, it would confirm everything Jonas was beginning to suspect. A few times, I admitted. A few times. And you didn't think to mention it because I knew you'd react like this. I knew you'd make it into something it wasn't. What is it then? Marina asked, her voice like ice. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like you've been having an affair while your husband was recovering from surgery. It's not an affair, I protested, but the words sounded weak even to me. Then what is it? Jonas asked. Help me understand, Lorraine. Help me understand why you've been lying to me for weeks, why you've been taking our daughter to another man's apartment, why you've been sneaking around like… Like what? I snapped, my temper finally flaring. Like someone who deserves to have a life outside of taking care of everyone else. Like someone who might want to have an adult conversation for once, instead of discussing your students and Eva's homework and what we need from the grocery store. The moment the words left my mouth, I knew I'd made a mistake. Jonas's face went very pale, and Marina stood up abruptly. You selfish bitch, Marina said quietly. Marina, Dad protested, but she ignored him. He was recovering from surgery, Lorraine. He needed you, and instead of being there for him, you were off playing house with your ex-boyfriend. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? Marina demanded. Explain it to me. Explain how taking your daughter to another man's apartment while your husband is homesick is anything other than exactly what it looks like. I felt cornered, desperate, like a wild animal backed into a cage. You don't understand. You've never been married. You don't know what it's like to lose yourself completely, to become nothing more than a wife and mother and caregiver. You don't know what it's like to wake up one day and realize you've disappeared. So you decided to find yourself in another man's bed, Marina shot back. I started, but Jonas held up a hand. Stop, he said quietly. Just stop. He stood up, still holding Eva, who was clinging to him and looking scared. We're going home, he said. Eva, go get your backpack. Jonas, please, I said, reaching for him, but he stepped away from me. Don't, he said. Just don't. He walked out of my parents' house without looking back, carrying our daughter, leaving me standing in the living room with my family's disappointed faces and the wreckage of my carefully constructed lies. Lorraine, Mom said softly, what have you done? I stared at Eva's drawing, still lying on the coffee table, and realized I didn't have an answer. What had I done? Jonas didn't speak to me for 3 days. He moved through our apartment like a ghost, getting Eva ready for school, making his own coffee, sleeping on the couch without explanation. When I tried to talk to him, he would look through me as if I wasn't there, and somehow his silence was worse than any argument we'd ever had. On Thursday morning, I found him in the kitchen packing Eva's lunch with mechanical precision. "Jonas, we need to talk." "No," he said without looking up. "We don't. You can't just ignore me forever. Watch me." His voice was flat, emotionless, and it scared me more than anger would have. I was used to Jonas being gentle, accommodating, eager to smooth over conflict. This cold stranger was someone I didn't know how to handle. "I can explain. Can you?" He finally looked at me, and his eyes were empty. "Can you explain why you lied to me for weeks? Can you explain why you took our daughter to another man's apartment? Can you explain why you chose the worst possible time in our marriage to have an affair?" "It's not an affair." "Then what is it, Lorraine? Because I've been trying to figure it out for 3 days, and I keep coming back to the same conclusion." Eva wandered into the kitchen in her pajamas, and Jonas's entire demeanor shifted, becoming warm and gentle as he helped her with breakfast. But the moment she left the room, the wall went back up. "I'm taking Eva to school," he said, grabbing his keys. "I'll pick her up too. I don't want her around. This is her home, Jonas. I'm her mother." "Are you?" The question was quiet, but it hit like a physical blow. Because mothers don't usually drag their 7-year-olds into their extramarital relationships. He left without another word, and I stood alone in our kitchen, surrounded by the debris of our morning routine, feeling like everything I'd built was crumbling around me. At work, I couldn't concentrate. My colleagues' chatter about weekend plans and office gossip felt surreal, like I was watching life through a window instead of living it. My phone stayed silent. No text from Jonas, no calls, nothing. But there was a message from Elliot. "Haven't heard from you. Everything okay?" I stared at the message for a long time before typing back, "Family drama. Can't talk right now." "Want to meet for coffee?" I'm a good listener. The offer was tempting. Elliot would listen, would understand, would make me feel like I wasn't the villain in the story. But something held me back. Not today. I put my phone away and tried to focus on work, but my mind kept drifting to Jonas's empty eyes, to Eva's confused face, to the way my family had looked at me like I was a stranger. That evening, Jonas came home with Eva and immediately started making dinner. I offered to help, but he ignored me, so I sat at the kitchen table and watched him move around our kitchen like he was choreographing a dance designed to avoid me entirely. "Daddy, why are you sleeping on the couch?" Eva asked over dinner. Jonas's jaw tightened. Sometimes grown-ups need space to think. "Are you and Mommy getting divorced?" The question hung in the air like a bomb waiting to explode. I felt my heart stop, waiting for Jonas's answer. "I don't know, sweetheart," he said quietly. "We're figuring some things out." After Eva went to bed, I found Jonas on the couch with his laptop open, grading papers. "Please," I said, "just talk to me." He closed the laptop and looked at me for the first time in days, really looked at me. "Okay," he said, "let's talk. How long has it been going on?" "Nothing's going on. Don't lie to me anymore, Lorraine. I can't take any more lies." The exhaustion in his voice broke something inside me. "We've been talking. Meeting for coffee, it's not what you think." "What do I think?" "You think I'm having an affair." "Are you?" The question was simple, direct, impossible to deflect. I thought about Elliot's apartment, about the wine and the conversation and the way he'd kissed me. I thought about the things I'd felt, the things I'd wanted, the line I'd already crossed in my heart, if not in my actions. "I don't know," I whispered. Jonas nodded like I'd confirmed something he'd already suspected. "At least you're being honest now." "Jonas, I'm sorry. I never meant for any of this to happen." "But it did happen, and you made choices, Lorraine. Every time you met him, every time you lied to me, every time you took our daughter into this mess, you made choices." Tears were streaming down my face now. I was lost. I felt like I was disappearing, like I didn't matter to anyone except as a wife and mother and caregiver. Elliot made me feel like myself again. "And what am I supposed to do with that?" Jonas asked. "How am I supposed to compete with the fantasy version of your life that he's selling you?" "You don't have to compete." "Don't I? Because it seems like I've already lost." The words were quiet, defeated, and they scared me more than anger would have. "What do you want me to do?" I asked desperately. Jonas was quiet for a long moment, staring at his hands. When he finally looked up, his expression was resolved in a way that made my stomach drop. "I want you to choose," he said. "I want you to decide what kind of person you want to be, what kind of life you want to live, what kind of mother you want to be to Eva. And then I want you to live with the consequences of that choice. And if I choose you, choose us, then you cut all contact with Elliot. No calls, no texts, no coffee dates, no explanations or goodbyes. You block his number, you delete his contact information, and you never speak to him again." The ultimatum was delivered in Jonas's teacher voice, calm, clear, non-negotiable. "And if I can't do that?" Jonas's smile was sad and small. "Then I guess we both have our answer." He reopened his laptop and went back to grading papers, effectively ending the conversation. I sat there for a few more minutes, waiting for him to say something else, to fight for us, to beg me to choose him. But Jonas had said everything he needed to say. The choice was mine. I went to bed alone and lay awake staring at the ceiling, thinking about the two paths stretching out in front of me. One led back to the life I'd known, safe, predictable, comfortable, and slowly suffocating. The other led toward something unknown, exciting, possibly wonderful, possibly disastrous. My phone buzzed. Another message from Elliot. "Missing you. Hope everything's okay." I stared at the message for a long time, my thumb hovering over the keyboard. Everything was not okay. Everything was falling apart. But maybe, I thought as I typed back, that wasn't necessarily a bad thing. "Missing you too," I wrote. "Can we meet tomorrow?" The response came immediately. "Of course. My place, 7 p.m.? I hesitated for just a moment before typing, "Yes." In the living room, I could hear Jonas shifting on the couch, probably unable to sleep just like me. Tomorrow, I would have to choose between the life I had and the life I wanted. Tonight, I was still suspended between both worlds, still able to pretend that I could have everything without losing anything. But deep down, I knew that tomorrow would change everything. The only question was whether I was brave enough or selfish enough to let it. The divorce papers landed on the table at Marcello's restaurant with a sound that seemed to echo through the entire dining room. I was in the middle of our company's annual celebration dinner, surrounded by colleagues who had been laughing and toasting just moments before, when Jonas appeared beside our table like an avenging angel in business casual. "Lorraine Orsay," he said, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent years commanding classroom attention, "You've been served." The restaurant fell silent. 23 people from my office, including my boss and the CEO, stared as my husband, my soon-to-be ex-husband, placed a thick manila envelope next to my untouched salmon. "Jonas," I whispered, mortification flooding through me. "Not here. Please." "Here," he said firmly. "Now, in front of everyone who's been watching you celebrate your new life while your daughter cries herself to sleep, asking why Mommy doesn't live with us anymore." At a work celebration, Jonas walked in, holding an envelope, and calmly exposed my affair in front of my colleagues. He read my messages aloud, proof that while he was recovering from surgery, I'd reconnected with my ex, lied about ending our marriage, and even discussed plans to move in with him. My co-workers stared in horrified silence as Jonas laid out every detail, including the fact that my texts had synced to our daughter's iPad. Then he revealed the worst part. Our 7-year-old thought she'd ruined the family because her drawing had exposed the affair. Jonas told her the truth, that adults make selfish choices, and then called his lawyer. He handed me a full custody petition, evidence of adultery, and a restraining order, keeping me away from our daughter and our home until the hearing. My belongings had already been packed and moved to storage. When my co-workers asked if it was true, I had no defense. Before leaving, Jonas added one final blow. Elliot, the man I'd thrown my marriage away for, had been living with another woman, and she'd kicked him out when she learned about us. Jonas walked out without looking back. My phone buzzed with a message from Elliot saying things had become complicated. My co-workers were already whispering, recording, and typing out everything they'd seen. In 10 minutes, I lost my husband, my child, my home, and my reputation. The affair that was supposed to make me feel alive instead exposed every lie I'd told and destroyed the life I'd taken for granted. I left the restaurant with the divorce papers in my hands, realizing Jonas had orchestrated the entire fallout with methodical precision. I called Elliot, voicemail. I was completely alone, left with nothing but the consequences of the choice I'd made.